they've experienced so much more death over there than what we're used to here in our Western culture. We might know 2, 3 people in our lives who die, maybe a little more, but over there, they all know dozens.
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library. Hello, friends. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Immigrant Experience in America. Here today with us is Olivia Abousaid, and I hope I say that correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Olivia. Welcome and tell us a bit about yourself.
You were very close. It's Olivia Abousaid. I am a grief and transformation coach, and wanted to speak today about my experience with my parents who were immigrants to this country. They came from Palestine in the 70s, and what their experience was like, what my experience was like as the child of an immigrant. And then I can also speak to being an immigrant for a brief period in 2006 and 2007 when I moved to France.
Okay, great, great. So tell us from the beginning, what brought them over in the 70s? What's the story?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. It's a great podcast, and I'm glad something like this exists. Um, experience coming here in the 70s. My father came first. He came to go to college in Texas. He was sponsored by, he used to be a tour guide in Jerusalem, and then he'd also take tours into Jordan as well. And one of his guests on the tour guide was a woman from Texas who wanted to sponsor him to come to this country. She was really impressed with him. So he came and went to college here, and then he was nearing his 30s. So he went back and said, it's time for me to find a wife. And somebody mentioned my mom, who he had known as a child. They, for a while, lived in the same neighborhood. They knew each other. So he went and spoke to her, and 2 weeks later, they were married. Yeah, and then he brought her over here to the States. She came in 76. I think he was 72 maybe. And then they had me in 78.
Wow, so the families agreed. What is it like customarily among the group, your people, when there's a marriage? Is there kind of in some cultures there's like a bride price and the family have to meet and agree and there's huge communal weddings and things like that. Like what is it like for you? I know you were born here, but do they even talk
Right.
about it? Do you know the customs?
Yeah, the customs have kind of changed from generation to generation. Back then, it wasn't uncommon to marry very young when you were still either in high school or just out of high school. And there's not I wouldn't call it a price, but there's maybe a dowry in a way. The groom will give some jewelry or something to the bride's family. And there's many parties slash events leading up to the wedding. There's like a whole week of different events, for men, for women, all different things. Some of them are um, together, some of them men in one place, women in one place, but lots of festivities. There's a lot that goes on around having a wedding in Palestinian culture, because it's a very celebratory experience. It's Weddings are huge over there still, because it's all about community over there, much more than what we see here in the States. And so it's a chance to bring together your friends, your neighbors, extended family, all in one place. So it's a really big deal for them over there.
Awesome, great. Typical of like most of the world, I saw some statistic that like 70 plus percent of the world is considered collectivist, more communal than like the individualistic Western way of operating.
Right.
So that's pretty typical across the world. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your dad met someone who was impressed by him and sponsored him. And to the average person listening, they're probably wondering, like, wow, how did this happen? There's no relation. But I'm assuming perhaps because this person has the financial backing to show that they can help your dad adjust to life in the US and support him while he's going to university and probably guide him to, I don't know if he had scholarships or what, or even paid for school. That is an important part of the equation to like making it to the US, right? Is to making sure that you're not going to be any sort of burden on the US government, and that you are able to
Right.
take care of yourself while you're here. So just to give an eye for those who might be thinking, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know too much details about her, about, how the sponsorship worked. We did meet her actually. We'd go over to her house several times when we were kids. She was very sort of typically Texan. She would bake pies for us from scratch, the old-fashioned way, and very Southern hospitality, very inviting. I don't know too much about how the sponsorship worked, but I know she was just very impressed with him. I think she spoke with him while she was on the tour and very impressed with him. And he was a very ambitious kind of guy and was interested in coming to study in the States. So um, that relationship formed quickly. And when he came, he did have to work. That was back in the days when college was cheap enough that you could actually work your way through school instead of ending up in a lot of debt. So he did work. He worked his way through school, and that's when he started to build a community here in the United States and was meeting other Palestinian-Americans and other Arab Americans who had also immigrated to the country and started to form that sort of foundation of what would become friendships for years to come.
Yes, that's an amazing story. You do hear stories of people who make decisions like that just to support another human being, right? To get to a different outcome in their life. And yeah, that's amazing to hear.
It was great.
Yeah, so I wonder what is life like in Palestine? Because you hear a lot of us don't quite understand that part of the world. You hear about the conflict that's going on,
Mhm.
and over time, that's all you hear, right? You hear West Bank, and so a lot of us don't quite understand the situation and how it's differentiated and who's on what side and all of that. Like, give us a sense for life in that part of the world, like foods that people eat. Have you ever gone back, since being born here?
Yeah, I've been back 7 times, although it's been quite a bit of time since the last time I was back. Growing up, my parents would take us back every 2 or 3 years because they wanted us to stay connected to the culture. They really wanted us to know, who we were, where we came from. That was really important, and I'm so glad that they did that because, it did help me to understand who I am, where we're from. It definitely helped, um, in speaking Arabic. At home, my parents would speak Arabic with us all the time. But, as you grow up in American culture, English is just becomes the easier language to default to. And so most of the time I'm speaking English, but I don't want to lose that Arabic. So I'm glad that, they kept speaking Arabic with us at home, that they would take us back every 2 or 3 years. It's definitely very different than American culture, in that it is a much more communal culture. The food is great, it's a Mediterranean diet, so, you're, eating a lot of healthy grains, lean proteins, lots of olive oil, lots of emphasis on fruits and vegetables, so I still eat that way to this day because it makes me happy to eat that way. I love all the fruits and the vegetables. It makes me just feel healthier in general. Um, but yeah, the region is, it's a mess, it's definitely a mess, and I think I keep hearing this story from Westerners that, oh, that this is about religion and these religions have been fighting for hundreds of years. And that's really a very misguided way of looking at things because prior to 1948, um, all of the religions were living in Jerusalem and Palestine, in peace. There were the three major religions. There's Judaism and Christianity and Islam, and they were all living there peacefully. After 1948, when the state of Israel was created, um, there was land that was annexed. It was called a Nekba. 750,000 Palestinians became refugees all of a sudden. Um, and so, since then, there's been a lot of land grabs. And what we're looking at now is an apartheid state where um, Palestinians are treated, they're not citizens of the land. They're not, their homes are being taken, their lands are being taken. And now what we're seeing in Gaza is, you have this genocide that's going on. And the land, Palestinians, much like what happened to the Native Americans here in the United States, Palestinians have been thrown into certain parcels of land. And in Gaza, especially, one could easily call that like a reservation or concentration camp, that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Same with the West Bank. More land is being taken. And so Palestinians now are really living in scary conditions. And so that's kind of where my work as a grief coach comes in, um, for this community and a lot of communities who are indigenous to the land and they've watched their land being taken away and they've watched their people being killed. And there's a lot of grief and generational grief that comes with that. Now I'm the third generation of Palestinian to be grieving what's happening over there, and that loss of land, the loss of autonomy, etc. And it's a lot. My parents' generation grieved that, my grandparents' generation, and now my generation is watching an active genocide. And there's so much grief and frustration and anger involved with all of that.
Yeah, it's really sad. And sometimes it's challenging for those of us outside of that who are not directly connected to anyone or to the story to kind of watch the media and kind of get the full story. Because sometimes we just get little bits and pieces of,
Mhm.
and there's always some sort of a spin behind what whoever is presenting it. And a lot of times we don't fully understand. And so, it's really sad. My heart goes out to you, your family. It's been going on for so long now where people are hoping that there'll be some sort of a peace agreement and it keeps falling
Mhm.
through. I can imagine. I think I remember at one time asking someone or even thinking to myself, like, what is life like for somebody in that region every day waking up and there's a bomb going off or something's being blown up, even before the recent conflict here started, because you
Mhm.
got the sense that this was ongoing for a very long time. And so you wonder what their psyche's like, just growing up on edge, feeling like something at any moment could go off. What's the mental health like of the people when you experience them, when you travel or from stories that you're hearing?
They that's a great question. It's a loaded question, because they've experienced so much more death over there than what we're used to here in our Western culture. We might know 2, 3 people in our lives who die, maybe a little more, but over there, they all know dozens. In Gaza, it's literally to the level of hundreds or thousands that each person knows who has died. My family, luckily, they're all in the West Bank. Um, and I say luckily in that they're not in Gaza right now, so that's great. But they live in fear all the time. They've lived through two intifadas, which were the Palestinian uprisings in trying to sort of resist the occupation that they're experiencing. But there's illegal Israeli settlements that have been kind of coming in the land around them. And a lot of these settlers tend to be, I'll just say it, in that they want all Palestinians, all Arabs off the land. And so there's a lot of harassment and there's constant fear. These people are heavily armed, and they're doing it with the support of the Israeli army. And so there's no it's lawless as far as Palestinians are concerned, and they're just living in a constant state of fear. And they've known so many people who have died, so they've just had to. They don't get a lot of time to process their grief. Here in Western culture and American culture, we do get that time. We do have the privilege of time to process our grief much more than they do there. And it's important to take that time to process that grief. Over there, they don't get that as much. So I would say the mental health isn't necessarily great over there. They just have to keep going and keep moving on. There's no other choice. As far as Gaza goes, they say they don't a lot of psychologists I've read about are saying that they don't even get a chance to have PTSD there because there's no it's always ongoing. So, um, they need a new name or a new designation for what's
Mm,
going on with the mental health with people in Gaza right now because it's never post, it never stops, it's still ongoing. And so it's just such an unfortunate situation. And we're all hoping and praying that this decimation, this genocide can stop sooner than later because it's horrific. The over 10% of the population in Gaza has been wiped out now. So it's tough. It's tough to watch that. It's important that we as Westerners bear witness to genocide and say, we see you and we're trying to work to stop this. Um, but it can be frustrating. It can be tough, and we're all hoping that it stops immediately, like now.
as well as many onlookers too. We don't understand the complexity of the issues, but it's when and on a human level, I think people are saying, when children, anybody is killed, but specifically when you hear the stories about children and women and some of the stories coming out, it's really sad. And you're like, no, like, a humanity on a human level, like that's not right. Like it needs to stop. But it's so much more complex than and we're even able to understand. And I hope. But it seems like all my life I've actually heard that there's a conflict in that region. So this is more of a boiling to the top of it, but it just always had seemed all my adult life. I've always heard that there were always some sort of a conflict or level of a conflict. Things might have slowed down at different intervals, but I think it just seems to have always been an issue from what I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been going on since 1948, and some people could say even before then because there were land grabs and things that were happening due to Zionism, even before 1948. But yeah, it's been a really unfortunate situation. I think even if people aren't getting the full story here in the US because of our kind of skewed US media, I think people can understand on a humanistic level that there are innocent civilians who are dying and that obviously that's not a great thing.
Right. So we hear this word being thrown around quite a bit, Zionism. Like you can Google or watch videos, but I don't even fully understand like what is it? Like what's behind this perspective?
That's a great question. It's this sort of ultra nationalistic, ethnocentric project where it's saying like only Israelis, only certain people can live on the land, and that's to the detriment of the indigenous Arab population, the Palestinian population who's living on the land. It's not saying, "Hey, let's all live together. We all want to kind of claim this as our space. Let's find a way to all live together." Instead, it's doing it through this sort of racist project of um, you know, Jews good and Palestinians bad, and that's what's so dangerous about it is that there are a lot of Jews out there who are saying like, not in my name, we don't want this project done in our name. There are a lot of great Jewish organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now who are speaking out and saying, we don't want you killing Palestinians in our name, but that is what Zionism is doing. The Zionist project is designed to say, only us, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, kill those guys. And so that's really kind of boiling it down into the simplest terms. Um, but, if you think about it, ethno nationalism is what got the world in trouble in the 1940s with the Nazis. And now we're seeing it again in present day. And it's never a good thing when one group says, we're the better group, and that group should all be killed, and after the Holocaust in the 1940s, a lot of people said never again. But what we're seeing is that it's happening again. And so unfortunately, that's what the Zionist project is all about. That's what Zionism is all about. And I think it's important for people to distinguish between Judaism and Zionism. Judaism is a religion like any of the monotheistic religions. It's like Christianity, it's like Islam. There are a lot of good people who are Jewish. And then there's Zionism, which is this racist project. They're two different things. And I think they get conflated a lot in a way that's dangerous to both Palestinians and Jews, in that, the term anti Semitism gets thrown out in cases where people are speaking out against Zionism and that ethno nationalistic project. So I think it's really important to distinguish between those two things.
Okay. I keep wondering as I'm listening to you, what was the population like prior to 1948? Do you know the history of who? I know you said that all three groups, religious groups, were living together, and then you hear people say that it's one people. I don't know if they're coming from the religious perspective, but they're saying these are just like one people who somehow over time have. I guess maybe it's coming from the Judeo-Christian perspective that religiously it's one people, and I'm not a biblical scholar, I can't speak on it, but people are saying it's one people and they're fighting against each other because there's a religious or biblical perspective behind that part of it. But like, who was there prior to 1948? Because people are saying that there's a large population of folks who moved from like Europe who came in to the land who weren't really there before. So what historically, like, who was there at 1948?
In 1948, it was primarily a Palestinian population, which was both Christian and Islamic, and there are Arab Jews as well. I think a lot of people don't know that. And then there
Mm.
were European Jews there as well, and they were all living together mostly peacefully. The Zionist project did start really at the end of the 19th century. And again, I'm not a scholar on this, but this is kind of just what I've learned, what I know, and I can recommend some books to read as well. But the Zionist project started at the end of the 1800s, and it said, we need to have our own state and kick out the indigenous population and make this our state. And so the land started being bought up um, in the 1900s and into the 1930s. So some friction was starting already. And then in 1948, when Palestinians were forcibly kind of kicked off of their lands and their homes were stolen. That was huge, but it was primarily a Palestinian population, and then there were some Europeans on the land as well, and they were all living together mostly in peace.
So there were others who were also removed from their lands, not just the Palestinians, or was it only Palestinians who got kind of pushed off?
It was Palestinians who got
Yeah,
pushed off.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
There was a war or some sort of a conflict in 48, and I guess there was a winner. And then I guess it was after that, then people started being pushed out. Is that officially the moment when it started?
Yeah, 1948 is when the State of Israel was created, and they had the backing of England as well as the US. And so they came in forcibly using military to create the State of Israel. And that's when so many people were killed, and when many villages were burned and people lost their lands. And that's when it all really went down.
It's quite complex, and as you were underlining earlier, it's not just a religious thing. It's
Yeah.
bigger than that, right? So I'm
Yeah, I
wondering.
would stay away from referring to it as a religious thing. A lot of people, I think because they do see it as a complex issue, try to boil it down to, oh, these are just religions fighting each other, but that's not the case. There's really a lot more. It's really more about land and politics and ethnocentricity. And so, um, there are some books I can recommend for people to read, like The 100 Years War on Palestine. That's a great one that people can check out. There's Black Power in Palestine. That's a really great one. Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé, who is an Israeli, they wrote a book on Palestine. And then this one, Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Plitnick wrote Except for Palestine. Those are great books for people to check out if they want to learn more about it. Didn't mean to get into a whole, political discussion about it, but I think it is important for people to understand the background a little, and why grief work can be so important right now when it comes to bearing witness to all of this, as well as the genocides that are occurring in Sudan and in Congo. Um, you know, and there are, Yemen is being hit, Syria is being hit, Iraq is being hit, Iran is being hit, Lebanon is being hit. There's so much going on in the world right now, and I think it's important to take time to process and to grieve these things right now because it is frustrating, difficult times.
Yes, it definitely is, and confusing for people who are on the outside watching and saying, "Oh, okay, like what's going on here?" Join us again next time for part 2 of this episode. We thank our listeners around the world, and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.